Hello and welcome to Security in Context. Today I have the pleasure to speak to Stephen Semler, co-founder of the Security Policy Reform Institute and author of the newsletter Speaking Security. Hello, Stephen. How are you today?
Hi, Anita. Doing good, thanks.
So I'm very happy to have you back. We are big fans of your work, as you know, so it's always great to join forces. And today, I'd like us to unpack your latest policy paper for Security in Context titled Returning Public Funds to the Public, a plan to convert excess U.S. military spending into $600 tax rebates. So, this policy paper lays out a plan aimed at refunding taxpayers for the dramatic increase in military spending that we've seen over recent years in the United States. So, what does your proposed bill do exactly?
Well, mechanistically, it's pretty simple. All it does is revert U.S. military spending this year in fiscal year 2024 back to 2021 levels. And the difference is 146 billion. So when Biden entered office, the last budget Trump had approved before begrudgingly leaving office was 740 billion, and the one Biden just signed into law for FY24 is 886 billion, and that excludes the pending military spending in the foreign aid bill that's still stuck in Congress. So it reverts military spending back to 2021 levels, freeing up 146 billion. And I use that 146 billion to cover the cost essentially of another round of $600 tax rebates. The last time they were issued in January 2021, they had a huge impact on human security. They decreased hunger by 6 million people. They decreased financial hardship by 9 million. They lowered the number of people living paycheck to paycheck by 12 million. And by many measures, the human security conditions in the United States are worse now than they were then. So there's a need for it, and the cost aligns too. The $146 billion cut that I'm proposing is actually $5 billion more than the cost of the $600 tax rebates the last time they were issued, and the cost of which were $141 billion. So to summarize, cut the military budget and use the savings to essentially refund the taxpayer for Biden's military buildup.
So, in your paper, you contend that the recent surge in military spending appears to be worsening the very problems that political and military leaders said it would solve, which you just mentioned, kind of. Or, in other words, that more military spending does not mean more security. Could you comment on this and elaborate also on the specific challenges that your bill aims to tackle?
Right. So in the US, like among political leadership, it's become such shorthand for political leaders to essentially equate more military spending with more security. It's almost like a performative relationship between the two, not like theatrical, but like Judith Butler performative, where it's just constructed, where it's just, the more we do it, the more that identity is constructed. So, you know, my bill aims to disrupt that by essentially waking the public up. So essentially, the problem with the military buildup is it invests in a broken foreign policy strategy. And it very much enriches a certain set of actors, namely the arms industry lobbyists, the think tanks, its war chest of campaign contributions that essentially tilt the U.S. towards conflict and essentially incentivize politicians to vote for legislation and policies that incentivize conflict. So the example I bring up in the paper is that, during the Trump administration, he introduced this concept of great power competition, and essentially prescribed an indefinite increase to the military budget to essentially outcompete China. So we're just probably going to try to outspend China, and it didn't work at all. Relations between the two countries deteriorated. The risk of conflict, which would be catastrophic, increased as well. And it essentially creates a security dilemma where, if China does something that's, possibly objective of its own defense, the U.S. might take it as an offensive move and vice versa. So the U.S. could do something legitimate in the South China Sea. But in the context of this great power competition, pretty much everything looks hostile. So Biden observed that disastrous policy for 4 years and then decided to enact the same one. And Trump really skyrocketed the military budget when he was in office. But Biden has really taken it in stride. So I think historians will look back on this moment and say, not only comment on the continuity between the two foreign policies, but also the continuity and how that's of military spending and how the rising military budget has given this hostile, dangerous, ill-fated foreign policy strategy life, essentially. So that's the one problem that it attempts to solve. And the other is just my observations of the human security conditions in the United States. So, um, you know, during the pandemic, or the peak pandemic, I should say, the U.S. had something resembling a European welfare state with the additional programs layered on to the kind of bare bones infrastructure we have so far. And human security conditions improved dramatically. Financial hardship rates, food insecurity rates, paycheck to paycheck living, housing related metrics too. Things really improve. But over time, since then, there's been a deterioration of that welfare infrastructure. And at the same time, military spending has increased. And as a result of that dynamic, the human security conditions in the US are worsening. And they're worsening at a time where the cost of living continues to increase, which makes matters worse. But people aren't getting the same level of government support that they were before that they are, than they are now. So it's a challenge that I'm just trying to just make a modest difference in. Again, slightly defunding the military, slightly reducing the military budget won't fix broken policy, but it can help limit the damage and essentially giving taxpayers $600 back that they wouldn't otherwise won't fix the problem of rising financial hardship and hunger, but it can make a difference.
Right. So finally, my last question is, considering the recent unsuccessful legislative attempts to reduce Pentagon spending, what aspects of your proposed bill do you believe increase its chances of achieving success?
So I think this bill does have a chance, legitimately. I'm not one to say, I'm not one of those activists who says, I know this is going to I know this is going to fail, but we should still go down trying. It's like, no, that's failure isn't really an attractive political slogan. So I wouldn't be writing it. I didn't write it, or I wouldn't be promoting it if I didn't think it had a chance. And the reason I think it does is because it makes the guns versus butter discussion. It turns it from a theoretical discussion into something tangible. It actually gives people um, an opportunity to get $600 back of their money that they wouldn't otherwise, so long as the military budget receives a commensurate cut. So by making that trade-off seem real, and making the trade-offs can manifest themselves in different ways. I mean, the money could, theoretically be put into different government projects, for example, but my motivation was just to make it as clear cut as possible and just say, look, here's $600 back. Like, really, you can hold this trade off that I'm offering in your hand. Basically, this is the peace dividend, literally. So I just tried to make it as clear cut as possible, and I don't think that previous pieces of legislation or even broader advocacy has appealed to people's needs. They've all been, moral appeals, basically, and commonsensical appeals, which I believe are important, obviously. But if you're relying on only on people's sense of morals or sense of justice, I think you've already lost. I think there has to be a connection to people's, basic needs, and I think this is the best way to do that, at least that I can think of. So I do believe it has a shot. Like right now, I'm meeting with congressional offices and trying to get established there, because it's one of those things where I want to have bipartisan co-sponsors, so Republican and Democratic co-sponsors. And I think I'm in the hardest part now, of just getting the bill introduced so it's a real thing, as opposed to just a proposal with security in context. So, I mean, it's extremely difficult, but I'm actually sure the next steps will be even more difficult, but I'm ready for it.
Hey, security in context is very real. Um, I was going to say, I was just having this recurring conversation about how, in the left, we keep getting lost in like very abstract solutions and discussions, right? So I do think that your proposal is very appealing in the sense that it offers tangible solutions for the people, where rather than theoretical concepts, which are also very important. But I do think the tangible is really effective, right? I was going to ask you if before we wrap up, there's any thoughts you'd like to share, anything you'd like to end with.
I would say just support security and context work because you're not going to read this type of proposal anywhere else. And I collaborated with them for a reason. And the crazy thing is, I'm really confident in the policy paper and the proposed legislation. I'm really happy with it, but it's not even the best thing that security and context have put out in the last couple of months. I don't think it's close either. So do check out their work and support it.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen, and I look forward to talking to you more in the future.
Likewise, thanks.